The Guinea's Attorney General has ordered legal proceedings against former President Alpha Condé and 26 of his former officials for alleged crimes, including acts of violence while in office. The charges against 84-year-old Condé and his allies range from complicity in murder and assault to destruction of property. Other alleged crimes include detention, torture, kidnapping, disappearances, rape and other sexual abuse and looting. Joining us now for insight into the West African nation is Africa analyst Dr. Charles Sinkala. Dr. Sinkala, good evening. Good to have you on tonight on In Focus. So, of course, was it always going to go this direction where the former leader would be charged?
Yes, Tavo, thank you so much for having me, and good evening to your viewers. It has become fashionable on the continent. Recently, we are just talking about Botswana and Ian Khama and the current president who is pursuing over some other charges, and many other parts of the African continent. So it's not very new in Guinea that former President Condé has been prosecuted in terms of some charges. And, you know, if you look at the list of the charges which has been identified, it's like also the whole cabinet, including the former Prime Minister, the former President of the Constitutional Court, and as well as the cabinet ministers, including, which is surprisingly, the security chief who was head of the government security.
Now, since being, of course, in office, did he in any way show signs of turning out to be the kind of leader that many are saying he was, well, at least what the opposition say he was?
I don't think so. I don't think so. You know, he served the country according to his ability, as he served, you know, and only these charges are coming now. It is quite shockingly, and to find out where these charges coming from. I am aware of the organization called the Forum for Protection of the Constitution, who actually orchestrated and organized people to demonstrate, leading to his being deposed of from government. You know, the other ones who reported these cases. But if you look at all the cases in terms of kidnapping, rape, and torture, you know, I don't think, you know, a human president such as him and this cabinet who takes that stance of killing people intentionally, just like that. You know, these are charges that are politically motivated, and simply because of course, we understand that he could have made enemies, and there are those political opponents who would like to work backwards instead of concentrating on going forward in terms of trying to, you know, highlight that he's actually supposed to be prosecuted. And, you know, it is not quite strange on the continent as we suffer same economical situations and hardships. So if we have those peddlers, you know, who bring up this confusion amongst the people and their heads of state, and especially those who are elected by the people, continue to pursue this type of financing of, you know, having people turning against their own elected leader. You can see as well that not only also that part of the world, also just here in South Africa, how President Zuma, instead of enjoying his retirement, is still being persuaded for other cases that has to be answerable.
So when did he begin to lose favor? I mean, if you track for us, what happened in after 2010? I mean, he was the first democratically elected president in the history of the West African country. But what happened? Why did his popularity take a dive?
Yeah, look, but always when you start serving your own people, you know, other ones, they won't be happy and they'll make people turn against you. And that is exactly what happened. Firstly, it's the military who said, no, he's not protecting them from either coup d'etat or the mushrooming insurgencies within that region. And, you know, they orchestrated the coup, and now the same situations which is happening. And I think, you know, the more enemies you make, the more good you do, you shall be eliminated as a head of state. And of course, that has led from him being deposed of. And yes, he could have been, you know, found not to have been presiding over the country and protecting the interest of the people, but to the large extent, he saved according to his ability. And I think these charges should have been avoided in terms of that country of rebuilding itself. And I think the social media as well, the mainstream media, they like reporting the bad news all the time. This is quite unfortunately. I think maybe the producers, one of the people whom I was speaking to earlier when I flew back to South Africa, was mentioning that, it's like producers of news. They are perusing through the news across the world and looking for only bad news that they should broadcast, which shouldn't be the case. There is also some parts of these leaders who do very good in terms of governance within their countries, as good as also they have their bad side because of the other enemies who may not like them. But overall, we tend to adjust ourselves, especially in that region which is infested with coup d'etats and a lot of uncertainties, and the people are suffering, especially the poor people on the ground.
There's some who are arguing that African leaders, they are their own worst enemies, in the sense that after serving their people maybe for a good 2 terms, because of their hunger for power, they would want to stay on. And most of them, they show signs, for example, of wanting to change the constitution. Alpha Condé is also one such leader who then says, well, now that the constitution has changed, it means the clock has now been reset and set back, so I can get more terms in office. So just reflect on that.
Yes, Tabo, that's what has been reported, that the situation is like that. I thought like that too, but when you analyze the situation, these leaders that do not even want to stay even longer than beyond their term. It's the people around them who say, no, you must stay longer because you are doing better and people like you. And after he persuades to change the constitution or attempts to change the constitution, then other people come back and say, but this is unconstitutional. Why are you changing the constitution to stay longer in power? So there's various forces which are involved in terms of these leaders. I wish we can have an interview with them, to ask them exactly what happens. And this is an opportunity that I think from your side, Tabo, as a media house, should invite these leaders, especially those who are deposed of, and find out in their mind if at all they actually wanted to stay longer than the constitution required, the 2 terms as head of state and government in those regions. But what I can say from this side, of course, there are those leaders who would like to stay in power, even if that they have lost their popularity, simply because of they've made so many enemies, and they think that themselves, if they die in power, that shall protect them from any prosecution once they leave office. This is the case that many leaders tend to stay in power for a very long time. Yeah. But look, staying into power, this got nothing to do with the governance or the bad side of the leader. In fact, we need in Africa that continuity, like what we've seen in the other part of the eastern part of Africa, where Paul Kagame has been there for a very, very long time, and the people of that country has got no problem with it. He has changed the country. He's united the Hutus and the Tutsis who massacred themselves in the year 2000, and when he came into power, he has reunited the people and they are working together. The problem only comes in if, there is some external influence from outside, especially in those regions of the West Africa where their budgets in terms of military, they contract other nations such as France and Russia to protect them in terms of providing them their military equipment and as well as training. It is estimated that on average on those countries in the West Africa, they spend about $375 million, annually in terms of protection. Some of them, they say they'll protect them from coup d'etats, but coup d'etats, they happen as often as breakfast.
Why was he so easily captured? I mean, does it have anything to do with the man who was once closest to him, Mamadi Doumbouya?
Yes. I think, he was captured in the sense that, I think some demands and some differences they had, especially with the military, arrangement in terms of political, because he was only elected, if you remember, he hasn't served so much in terms of being, and he's the only elected president, democratically elected president in that region. We thought that the normalcy is going to come, but only when he comes in to starts doing some cleanup. then is faced with military disobedience and the juntas who rose against him. And the people joined because of the economic hardship in that country. They thought it's him who's making them not to eat. But, that food on the table has remained absent, even if he's absent from being a head of state in Guinea.
Other heads of states turning a blind eye, or feeling indifferent almost about the fall of Alpha Condé?
Yeah, of course. It's only that because of the Vienna 1961 Convention, they cannot interfere. They sadly cry and feel pity in their hearts that their colleagues, go through this type of situations and predicament, especially when they were very well respected on the continent as the head of state of those countries. You must remember, Tabo, that heads of states and governments, they have some platform that they interact themselves. But, it is sad to see their fellow colleague, being prosecuted by their own people. This should be avoided at all costs, especially going forward, that the new leaders or whoever who comes into power, they should learn from the past and not dwell much on the past and move forward in terms of governing the country. Now, if they concentrate, and in fact, in this trial, what we're going to now expect after these charges, we're going to see that over 26 senior government officials has to go through that process of trial. We've learned already here in South Africa that the state capture has spent almost R500 million in terms of finding out what was wrong in the so-called the West 10 years or 9 years of President Zuma. It is unfortunately that it's a waste of time that, the little money that these countries has, instead of putting those resources and helping the poor people, they shall subject that to the judicial process in terms of finding out who was right and who was wrong. And many of these cases, they don't find them guilty unless, the outside world comes in and they take them to the ISIS, like what happened to President Charles Taylor, who was prosecuted from outside the continent. And then, in that case that they found him guilty, and I don't know where he is now, but within the local of the countries in Africa, no head of state has been found guilty or later on put behind bars.
Is that what you're suggesting? The Cyril Ramaphosa's of this world, the Lorencos, the Fwekis can do for him at this point?
There's little things that they can do, because of what we talk about, the independence of the judiciary system. Unfortunately, the common law as well hasn't evolved over the years, as we franchised it from either the Roman Dutch law and as well as the British law in terms of prosecution. So anybody, Tabo, can lay a charge, but laying a charge does not mean that that person is guilty. Still, they have to be subjected to trial. And look, that common law is very loose, actually. I can go tomorrow and register a case against you that you have done something bad to me, and the police will open up the case because they have little facts, and they normally say that the investigating officer who shall investigate and find out whether it is true or not. And that's why these organizations, so-called the civil rights organizations, such as one we are talking about in Guinea, they took that advantage to go and deposit of the case with and these charges has been laid down. And the whole charges is laughable. If you talk about governance and failure to govern the country, failure to do certain things, one will understand that also corruption has been a bigger problem on the continent in terms of leadership to consolidate the governance. But when you talk about the head of state, former head of state, being charged of rape, being charged of torture, being charged of atrocities, it's just something that one wouldn't even understand. And I think even him, wherever he is, he must be surprised that his own people has charged him for, being head of state for that short time as democratically elected head of state in Guinea.
One can't help but ask, where will this end? How will it end? I mean, we know that the military is in power. by and large, history tells us that the military never serves the people, it serves its own interests. So will this result in political and economic ruin for this West African country?
Yeah, of course. If the country is under the military command, the country is under actually state of emergency. So I don't see even why and how the trial will proceed during that period, because certain processes and rights of people, and as well as some powers of government, are suspended during this time. So probably it could be something very well of to sell to the news, to the media, and they portray that image. But these cases usually, especially due to the low budgets on our continent, they end up disappearing from the mainstream media. But if that's the case, that maybe the case will go to trial, probably President Gondo is actually even outside the country. Maybe shall be tried in absentia. I believe is in Dubai, is away from that country, and many others, those who have been charged, including the speakers of the National Assembly. Just imagine, also they're not in the country, and I think they're also scared of being persecuted through that trial.